Hello and welcome back to another video. So today I wanted to take a look at what a potential landslide scenario could look like for JD Vance in the 2028 presidential election. So right here we have the map of the 2024 presidential election, and as you can see, Donald Trump won 312 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 226 electoral votes, and in the popular vote, Donald Trump won by about 1.5%. So obviously, this is going to be a predictive scenario, so there's no exact science to this, but this scenario is going to be based off of a few principles. We're going to assume that Trump has a slightly positive approval rating, so he might have a 51% approval rating and a 49% approval rating, or somewhere around there, where Trump has a slight net positive, and we're going to assume that JD Vance has a slightly net positive approval rating as well. And on the Democrats' side, we're going to assume that they nominate a weaker candidate, perhaps Pete Buttigieg. And in terms of how the country is doing, we're going to assume that inflation is low, unemployment is low, the economy is doing well, the stock market is doing well, trade is doing well, the tariffs have had a positive impact rather than a negative impact. We're going to assume that Trump is popular on the immigration issue, and overall, we're just going to assume that the Trump administration is more popular than not. Again, these are a set of assumptions that we're going to work with specifically for this scenario. So we're going to assume that the Trump-Vance administration is mildly popular. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this map could look like. So to fill out these safe red states, we're going to fill out states like Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas, a lot of these states in the South that voted for Donald Trump by a very comfortable margin. And to clarify, if I mark a state as safe, I think that state will go to that candidate by at least points, by at least 10 points. And if it's a likely state, I think it'll be between 5 and 10 points. And if it is a lean state, between 1 and 5, and a tilt state would be between or less than 1 point. So filling out the safe states, I think these are probably going to be all of the safe states. Now, going on to the safe states for the Democrats, I think the Democrats in this scenario would win each of these states by at least 10 points. And to talk a little bit more about this scenario, I think, we're going to assume that JD Vance wins the popular vote by around 4 to 5%. Remember, Trump won in 2024 by about 1.5%. So for the Democrats, I think these should be the states that they win by at least 10% in this scenario. Now, going to the likely states for the Democrats, I think we could see Colorado. This was a state that Harris won by 11 points, so it was very close to being likely blue. And then Illinois, Harris won by less than 11 points. Same idea there. New York, she won by 12.6. These were all states that she barely won by a safe margin. And then going on over to Connecticut, Rhode Island, I think, and as well as Delaware. Sorry, I should have marked that as likely, because Delaware, Harris won by less than 15. Same thing in Connecticut. Rhode Island, less than 14 points. I think in this scenario, Vance could get those states below a 10-point win for the Democrats. Now, going on over to the likely states for the Republicans, In Arizona, Trump won by 5.5%. In this scenario, Vance wins by high single digits. Georgia, Trump won by 2%. Vance would win by 5 points, I would say. North Carolina, Trump won by 3%. Vance would win by 6, maybe 7%. And then going on over to Pennsylvania, this was a state that Trump won by 1.5%. Michigan, same idea. Vance would just barely get to the 5% mark here. Now, Wisconsin, Harris kept Trump to a margin of less than 1%. So I think Wisconsin, Vance would win by maybe 3 or 4 points, making it a lean red state. Now, in New Jersey, this was very interesting. Harris won by only 6% after Biden had won it by 16% in 2020. That was a huge 10-point shift towards the Republicans. I don't see it realistically shifting another 10 points towards the Republicans again in 2028, even in a best case scenario. However, I could see it narrowing down to maybe 2 points in a really good night for the GOP. Now, looking over to Virginia, this is a state that Harris won by less than 6 points after Biden won by 10 points. I think Vance could narrow it down even further to a Democratic win here by 3 or 4 points, which would make it a lean blue state. Now, going on over to Nevada, Trump won here by 3 points. Simply a 2-point swing would make this a likely state for Vance. And then in Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, Harris won by less than 5 points. I think Vance can narrow this down where the Democrats win it by less than 1%. Now, looking over at New Mexico, Harris won by 6 points. 3 to 4 point win here for Vance in this scenario. And then we have 2 states left, we have 3 left, Maine at large, New Hampshire, and Minnesota. Now, Minnesota, Harris won by 4%. Her running mate, Tim Walz, was from here. And this is a state that Biden won by 7%. But Vance could certainly narrow it down. In fact, this is a state that has not voted for a Republican since 1976. The last time it voted for a Republican for president was in 1972 with Richard Nixon. In 1984, when Ronald Reagan won 49 states, Minnesota was the one state that he did not win. So I think in this scenario, with a state that Trump lost by 4 points. I think in this landslide scenario, JD Vance would make history, and he would very narrowly carry Minnesota. And then going on over to Maine at large, Harris won by about 7 points. I think he narrows this to a lean margin here. And finally, in New Hampshire, this is a state that Harris won by less than 3%. However, Biden did win by 7.5%. And if we look back to 2016, Clinton won by less than half a percentage point. And that was with the Libertarian Gary Johnson getting over 4% of the vote. I think Vance could very narrowly pull it off here, but it would take a lot to flip Minnesota and New Hampshire. But in a best case landslide scenario for JD Vance, where he wins the popular vote by 4 or 5%, I think we could see a map like this, where JD Vance wins 326 electoral votes and the Democrats win 212. Keep in mind, in 2024, Donald Trump won 312 electoral votes, so this would be a 14 electoral vote improvement for the Republicans, flipping Minnesota and New Hampshire and narrowing down the margins in a lot of blue states and improving a lot of margins in red states, especially in the Northeast. A lot of these blue states, they'd no longer be safe blue. And then states like Virginia, New Mexico, they'd get close to flipping. Illinois would no longer be safe blue. States like Ohio, Iowa, Texas, Florida, they'd continue to be safe. And then states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, they would go red by a more comfortable margin compared to what Trump won them by in 2024. So thank you guys for watching. Again, this is a purely hypothetical scenario, but if you did enjoy, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe, turn on post notifications, leave a comment. Please help me get to 100 subscribers, and I will see you all in the next video.